Heartbeat Alaska would like to thank the following sponsors for making our show possible. Brown's Electric. Thank you, Brown's Electric, for your generous support. Heartbeat Alaska is also brought to you by Frontier Flying Service. Thank you, Frontier, for getting Heartbeat Alaska airborne. Heartbeat Alaska would like to thank Cognac Incorporated. Without their support, this show would not be possible.
Heartbeat Alaska is also brought to you by Comtech Business Systems Incorporated and by the Maniluk Association, providing health and social services to residents of Northwest Alaska for over 30 years.
1, 2, 3, 4, let's go.
It's Heartbeat.
It's a fabulous show.
Alaska.
Hi, Heartbeat Alaska.
It's Heartbeat. Alaska.
Pull up a chair and enjoy the show.
Hear it from Sitka to Barrow. Gather around for Jeannie's show. It's the Aleut, the Indian, and the Eskimo. It's the Aleut, the Indian, and the Eskimo.
Welcome one, welcome all.
Hello everyone and welcome to Heartbeat Alaska Native News and Information. I'm Jeannie Green. Thank you so very much for joining us. Today we travel to Tanana, Alaska for a dog mushing symposium, and we learn the wisdom of dog mushing from over a dozen mushers. Join me now as we travel to Tanana, Alaska, a dog mushing country. Footprints in the snow tell the story of a people who have walked this land for centuries, a people who earned their way, hunting and gathering on foot. But as we follow these footprints through time, they suddenly end, and a new print begins. Man's Best Friend. It's a title that our four-legged friends have earned over the years. It's hard to imagine how dogs have changed our lives so drastically, but the truth is they have. Over the years, dogs have taught us about loyalty, commitment, working together, and have made life easier for thousands of people across Alaska. Their strength and endurance have helped Alaska Natives not only provide for their families, but has allowed us to travel great distances in less time. In 1925, dogs would leave their paw prints in the pages of history forever as Norwegian musher Leonard Seppala and his dog team began the trek from Nenana to Nome with the life-saving diphtheria serum. Today, however, dog teams are no longer used for hauling wood, gathering, or hunting. The snow machine has replaced dog teams for traveling purposes, and dogs have taken on a new role. Sprint and distance racing have become the specialties of today's dogs. The dogs are bred for speed and endurance. Alaskan Huskies have been crossbred with European dogs, and today's Eurohounds have become the dog of choice. Raising dogs and running teams is no easy task. It's a lifelong commitment that requires dedication and long hours. Every day, mushers must feed the dogs, run the dogs, and train the teams to work together. It takes years of experience to raise and run dogs, experience for which there is no substitute.
We've always been a really into dog mushing here in Tanana, and it's really important for us to keep this tradition alive here.
And that's why the community of Tanana recently held their first Dog Mushers Symposium as a way to learn about the art of raising and running dogs from some of the world's top professionals. Some of these veterans have been driving dog teams long before dog mushing was a sport. For several of these mushers, driving dogs was a way of life.
A lot of people try to go out and live subsistence by having a generator and having this and or all this new stuff. And to me, the way to do it is get to the basic, the core, what's worked for the people here for hundreds and hundreds of years. And the fish, the dogs, and that, what we call the old time stuff. That stuff has such a firm foundation that it'll work. It worked then, it'll work now. But you got to give up all the you got to give up all the other stuff. But that's pretty much where the dogs came in with me. They feel that anyway, it wasn't a gap. It was what I just had to have the dogs to make everything work. I used to haul all my firewood with dogs. I did my trapping with dogs. I even drug the logs up to build my home with dogs. So the dogs were a integral part of my whole lifestyle.
We utilize the dogs year-round. Summertime, we have them pull a rowboat on the beach. Like my dad and I, he didn't have money to buy a outboard motor, so he had to utilize the dogs to pull 10 bales of fish at a time from 10 miles below Kayakuk, and it takes about 4 hours. The dogs are hooked up on the harness, and the rope is tied in the middle of the boat, and my dad would just steer the boat. And when you get up to the cotton caving area, the dogs would go in the water, and he would just say, "Ha," and "Gee," and they would swim around the snags.
I trapped with dogs. I didn't just get into racing. I trapped with dogs quite a few years before I ever raced. My reason for having dogs wasn't for racing. I thought racers were sort of nuts. I'd heard about George Attla and I read his story, and I knew he was nuts. So I didn't want nothing to do with that racing part. I hope George heard that.
The thing that was going through in my mind when I ran the Iditarod was, I must be crazy, And I really didn't, after it was over, I thought, it wasn't that bad, So I tried it again, and that's when I really found out I was crazy then.
Crazy or not, these mushers have been raising and running dogs for a large part of their lives, and there's one thing that holds true for all of them. They love it.
If you raise some dogs and raise some pups, and one of them becomes a leader and is obedient and start doing what you want it to do, man, it grabs a hold of you, The dog mushing grabs a hold of you, and you get caught into it. And 40 years down the road, you're still playing around with the son of guns, And that's what happened to me. 40 years later, I'm still behind those dogs.
From this table came a wealth of knowledge that's not available anywhere else. These dog mushers share trade secrets on breeding dogs, how to care for dogs, the different styles of harnesses used throughout the years, to the types of sleds used over the decades.
European mushers started coming to Alaska and running in our races, and they started beating us by minutes and minutes and seconds. And they're using these all newfangled sleds made out of fiberglass, and they look like real cross-country skis on the bottoms of them, and they're brightly colored, and they're light. And these new sleds were beating us 7 seconds a mile that they were gaining time with our traditional wood sleds. And in some corners, they might cut off 20 seconds. And we're thinking, 7 seconds a mile, and they're only beating us by 20 or 25 seconds overall in a race.
Now these new sleds, they're, because of the flexibility that's wanted in the sled, we done away with all of that. And the sleds I'm building now are completely built out of just using bolts and plastic and some snow machine parts in there. And you know, that's just the design we got to come up with if we want to be competitive, you know, in the market, in the world market on dog sleds.
Years ago, all the dog sleds and stuff was all, especially native-made sleds were made with that babish. What you do is you put it in water and you soak it, and when it gets real limber, then you put it on your sled, and as it dries, it tightens up. It goes back to like it is there right now. Usually what we used to do, I've done some with a friend of mine named Jake Butler. We used to start in the center of a moose hide and work your way out by cutting it with a pocket knife, and you cut it, and then you stretch it like a clothesline. You put it in between trees and stretch it out.
I think that feeding dogs red meat is one of the things that has changed a lot on the Yukon itself anyway, being able to feed red meat instead of just fish all the time.
The first time I saw meat, I was probably about 10, 11 years old. I remember George Attla came to town here to race our Yukon River Championship race. And I went down there, and he was getting ready to feed dogs, and I saw him opening up all these Alpo cans. And to me, that was technology. It was starting. And we went home there, and I fed dogs with my dad, and we gave them half a dry fish, and I think they each got a cup of commercial with a little water, and they were ready to go. And I remember that really stuck in my mind there, as I can remember back now, as how much it's progressed in feeding.
One old timer was telling me that when people start having interest in racing dogs, when Leonard Sapella came up to from Nome, and one way or the other, Nulato or someplace got breed from Leonard Sapella, and that's where them blue-eyed dogs came from. I think Lake George Smalka had Bunch and Sanders Cleaver. That's where his dogs came from, that line of Sapella's breed, blue-eyed dogs, you know.
I've always had to drive dogs to really find out what's the good ones, but it seemed like some people had a little bit more of a sense looking at dogs than I did. Anyway, I said, Lester, which ones are going to be the good ones? And I had a little idea about some that were doing a little better than others, but and he says, well, he looks at them and he says, well, that's your good one right there. And then he said, those two other ones, they're pretty good. They're going to be okay there. He said, you better just get rid of the other three. So I kept the dogs. I didn't listen to them. I mean, I listened to them, but it wasn't like I went and got rid of those 3 dogs. They just kept driving them. And sure enough, in the end, when it was all said and done, months later, I got rid of those 3 dogs, and I kept those 2 okay dogs because they were pretty good, and that other one was probably one of the 2 or 3 best dogs I've ever had. And so I'd just like to ask Lester right now, partially because I'd like to kind of hear him talk about it, and partially because I'd like to hear him get up here and say something. I'd like to know what he sees when he's looking at these darn dogs.
Well, I can see it. I can see a lot of things that people can't, you know. And like George always does, he used to do that to me too, you know. But to look at the dogs, you know, I always look at their elbows right here. And if their elbows is about 2 inches, their chest, you know, their chest below their chest, and their back legs has got a nice curve to it. And it throws the motion like this, you know. And that's all you have to look for. If they don't got a good curved back leg and they're not big, they ain't gonna run that good, you know.
It's that simple, huh?
That simple.
Well, why didn't you tell me?
Besides all of the secrets of the trade and the tidbits of priceless information shared at this symposium, there were also the stories from a day gone by and the memories that go with each.
Back in 1947, I shot a moose in a camp in November, and it was a cow moose, and it had a little bull. It was probably about a year and a half old with it, and the bull kept notching my back because I tried to butcher the moose. I got it. When I went back home, I thought I'd get my mother to try to keep that bull moose away from me while I butchered up. And just then, Morris Demoski and Vincent Yaska came down on a pair of skates. I told them, "Oh boy, you're going to help me to keep that moose away while I butcher it." And Vincent said, "You got a rope?" I said, "I didn't take nothing." And I gave him brand new half-inch rope that we were going to use for tow line for the dogs that winter. So I gave him the rope, and we got up to the moose, and Vincent made a loop. I said, "What are you going to be?" "I'm going to be a cowboy." And he said, I said, "What?" He said, "We're going to tie up that moose. We're going to come back in Thanksgiving. We're going to have moose dinner." He said, like a darn fool, we chased it between the two trees. He tried roping it. The first throw, he missed a moose that landed on the nose. But the second time he threw it between another three, he got it around the neck and behind the horn. And the moose eventually got straight up like that and took off galloping like a horse. And Vincent hollering back there, ended the rope, him and Morris, "Whoa, whoa, whoa." And the Vincent is a little man. The snow was only about 4 inches deep. I saw his footprints after about every 10 feet. He was just flying with that moose.
The relationship between man and dog has been one of respect. They have managed to coexist forever by taking care of each other. Dogs have played an integral role in the history of Alaska Native people, a thread that is weaved through the centuries. But more than that, they have helped us to provide for our families and communities. They're our protectors, our overseers, and have helped us to stay in good physical condition.
We were dependent on them, and as well as they were dependent on us. I remember coming down as a kid from Crosstag. We were traveling, and all of a sudden, our lead dog just took us way around. And Grandpa said, "What's going on with that dog?" And Grandma said in our native tongue, there must be a water hole there. And that dog sensed that there was running water. There was a big water hole underneath the snow, and just took that lead dog just took the team right around it.
You know, nobody's going to get on that treadmill or go to that gym every day or do 500 sit-ups or whatever it is you want to do. It all sounds good, but nobody does it. But when you got the dogs, you have to do it. You know, it ain't like it don't take much discipline. You know, you got to run them, and so you got to be out there doing it. And it's a motivation to keep you really active.
I'm 71 years old now, and I keep dogs for other reasons. I think probably some of the same reasons that the rest of the guests here keep dogs for. You know, it's a lifestyle, and really it's good for your health because they're, you know, you have to work on them all the time. And a lot of times the old lady might be mad at you and tell you to get out of the house, and you walk into your dog yard and the dogs will all be wagging their tails and hollering, "Wow, here's the champ," you know. So, you know, for all those different reasons we keep dogs, you know, they make you feel good. And, and I believe, you know, anyone that starts out in dogs, you have to feel good with what you're doing because you get it back in return.
And as far as the health thing, if you want to lose weight and get in shape, chase dogs around in about 4 foot of snow, breaking trail for 12, 16 hours, and you forget about your weight problems and all that other stuff.
Other topics included the future of dog mushing in Alaska and different ways to incorporate dog mushing into the world of tourism.
You got to teach these kids how to care for their dogs, you know. There's, you know, got to feed them every day, water them first thing in the morning, and then before you run them.
But also, too, is we try to teach them everything we possibly can out on the trail, and what they need and what they need to do, and all them kind of things. And it's a lot of fun. I have a lot of fun out there teaching them, and we have a lot of fun watching them drive dogs. It's a great thrill, and I'd like to see more people. I know it's hard when you're training dog teams and stuff to volunteer your time, but it's really rewarding to see some of them kids when they get it and start doing some things. It's really amazing.
When we help out a lot with the kids races in Fairbanks, and I see all these new mushers trying to come, and they're a kid that are like a lot of you kids sitting in here. They're 10, 12 years old, and they want to drive dogs. And they go to the dog pound and they find one dog, or they go to somebody and get one dog picked up, and they come to the race. And they have an old wooden broken down sled somebody gave them. They have a really ratty tow line, but they're trying. And then they have to have one parent at least to take them to that dog race. So it's a family event, and everybody at that race is trying to help them and give them little tips of the trade that's okay if you have a bad sled. That's okay if you have bad lines, you know, just work with your dogs and enjoy yourself.
I think tourism and dog mushing, especially guys with big names, you guys got a name. Your name is famous. Your name is worth something. You've got an advantage over even guys like me that I have a name too, but it ain't in dog mushing. It's in talking. But big opportunity there, and I wouldn't pass it up. I wouldn't pass it up because tourism is increasing in Alaska because it's a safe place and it's exotic, and it's just like a foreign country, even to the people living in the States.
Last year, as far as keeping the tradition of mushing goes, is where I'm going with this, we had our first tour. We had a doctor from the lower 48 get a hold of us kind of through the Yukon Quest. Basically, we met him at a checkpoint in the Quest. And he came up with us for 10 days, and we went out and broke trail for 200 miles out on the Yukon River. And, you know, he had all these lists of things he wanted to do. He wanted to mush at night. He wanted to not hear a snow machine when he's mushing, and, you know, all these mushing things. And the only other thing that was on his list that absolutely had to happen was he had to come to town to see this man race. And even though, you know, we were at Creamer's Field and, you know, we got 2 30-second glimpses, that was worth the trip from the lower 48. It was all he could talk about, and, you know, we're mushing through the storm on the Yukon and this and that. Yeah, that was all right, but you know what? I got to see George go by, and that was the greatest thing. I've read so much. So you are famous, you big mushers and names that have been a while, and people all over the world know it. And so it is a small sport, and it seems unknown, but it is special. And things like getting together a bunch of river dogs and bringing them to town and racing them was huge for the sport, and we thank you for that last year.
What the future of dog mushing holds, nobody knows for sure. Some say that dog racing is fading away, while others are just beginning their journey. Regardless, there's a passion for the sport of dog racing and a love for the timeless tradition of running dogs. Thank you, everyone, for joining me for Heartbeat Alaska Native News and Information. This time of year, dog mushing is happening all around the state of Alaska. These guys are so tough and so ready to share their information. This is a great show. I hope you tune in. I'm Jeannie Green. God bless every single one of you, and we'll see you again next week.